The road into Pine Ridge Reservation looked like it had been forgotten by the rest of the world. Cracked asphalt, dead grass on both sides, and a sky so wide and gray it felt like it was pressing down on everything beneath it. Sarah Calloway gripped her steering wheel with both hands and told herself, for the 100th time that morning, that she was fine. She was always fine. That was the lie she had been telling since she was 9 years old, standing in a hospital hallway while a nurse explained to her in a soft voice that her mother was not coming home. Sarah was 32 now. She had a master's degree in social work, a used Honda Civic with a cracked side mirror, and a box of granola bars on the passenger seat. She had driven 14 hours from Chicago to take a temporary position at the reservation's Youth Services Center. The job listing had said 6 months, remote location, emotionally demanding. She had applied the same night she found it, because emotionally demanding was the only kind of work she knew how to do. It was the only place she felt useful. It was also, if she was honest with herself, the only way she knew how to keep moving so she did not have to sit still long enough to feel what was waiting for her underneath. Her last relationship had ended 8 months ago. Daniel had looked at her across a dinner table and said, quietly and without cruelty, that loving her felt like trying to hold water. She did not argue. She did not cry. She packed a bag that same night and drove to a motel, and she had not looked back once, because looking back was the one thing Sarah Calloway absolutely refused to do. The center came into view as she rounded a long, slow curve in the road. It was a low, flat building painted a faded green that might have once been cheerful. A hand-painted sign above the door read, White Eagle Youth Center. Several kids were sitting on the front steps, and they watched her car pull into the gravel lot with the kind of careful, measured attention that children who have learned not to trust strangers too quickly develop over years of disappointment. She parked and stepped out. The wind hit her immediately, cold and sharp and carrying the smell of sage and dry earth. She breathed it in and felt something strange happen in her chest. Not pain. Not the familiar tightening she usually felt in new places. Something quieter than that. Like the land itself was asking her a question she did not yet know how to answer. You the new social worker? She turned. A boy, maybe 12, sat apart from the others on the railing. He had dark eyes and a serious face and was wearing a jacket 2 sizes too big. I am, Sarah said. My name is Sarah. You look tired, the boy said. I drove a long way, she answered. He nodded, as if that was an acceptable explanation. I'm Marcus. My uncle runs this place. Before she could respond, the front door opened, and the air around her seemed to shift in a way she could not explain. The man who stepped out was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the kind of quiet, settled confidence that did not need to announce itself. He looked to be in his late 30s, with dark hair pulled back and eyes the color of deep river water. He wore a simple flannel shirt and worn jeans, but there was nothing ordinary about him. He looked like someone the land had shaped deliberately, as if the reservation itself had decided he should belong to it completely. He looked at Sarah for a moment before he spoke. You made it, he said. His voice was low and even, like the sound of distant thunder that has not yet decided whether to storm. Barely, she admitted, and surprised herself by meaning it as a joke. Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile. Something softer and more careful than that. I'm Nathan Eagleheart, he said, extending his hand. Welcome to Pine Ridge. She shook it. His grip was firm, warm, steady. And when she let go, she had the strange and unsettling feeling that something had already begun between them. Something she was not ready for. Something that, for the first time in a very long time, she did not immediately want to run from. Nathan Eagleheart had grown up learning 2 languages at the same time. The first was Lakota, which his grandmother had taught him around a kitchen table that smelled of fry bread and pine smoke. The second was silence, which his father had taught him by example, sitting on the porch after long days and saying nothing, letting the land speak instead. Nathan had spent his whole life learning to listen to both. And both had shaped him into a man who noticed things that other people walked right past. He noticed, for instance, the way Sarah Calloway held her coffee mug with both hands the next morning, as if she needed something solid to hold on to. He noticed how she smiled quickly at everything, reflex fast, like a wall being built before the actual feeling could reach the surface. He noticed that she asked every child at the center careful, thoughtful questions but gave almost nothing away about herself, deflecting with a smooth professional grace that most people would have taken for warmth. Nathan knew the difference between warmth and armor. He had worn armor of his own for years. She had arrived on a Tuesday. By Friday, she had reorganized the center's filing system, started a weekly art session for the younger kids, and earned the grudging respect of Marcus, who trusted adults about as much as a wild horse trusts a rope. Watching her work, Nathan felt something shift in the quiet part of himself he had kept carefully undisturbed since his wife, Elena, had died 3 years ago in a car accident on the highway that ran through the eastern edge of the reservation. Since then, he had poured everything into the center, into the community, into being the person his nephew and his people needed him to be. He had made peace with the idea that the part of him capable of loving someone was simply finished, like a fire that had burned through its last wood. He had not counted on Sarah. On Friday afternoon, he found her standing at the edge of the property where the ground sloped gently down toward a flat stretch of open land. She was looking out at the horizon, and she had that stillness about her that people fall into when they think no one is watching them. It was the most unguarded he had seen her. "The sun sets differently out here," she said, without turning around. She had heard him approaching. He noticed she was always aware of where people were, always tracking exits and arrivals. Another thing a person learns when they have been surprised by pain too many times. "It takes its time," he agreed, stopping a few feet away. "In the city, the buildings cut it off. Here it gets to finish." She was quiet for a moment. "Marcus told me about your wife. I'm sorry." Nathan had learned to receive condolences without letting them pull him under. "Thank you," he said simply. "How long did it take?" she asked. Then she caught herself. "I'm sorry. That's too personal." "No," he said. "It's an honest question." He thought about it genuinely before answering. "I don't know if it took time or if I just got better at carrying it. Those aren't the same thing." She finally turned and looked at him. Her eyes were pale gray, and in the fading light they looked like winter water, deep and cold and moving beneath a still surface. He held her gaze without flinching, which seemed to surprise her. "I carry things too," she said quietly. It was the first real thing she had said about herself since she arrived. "I know," Nathan said. She blinked. "How?" "Because you're careful," he said. "People who've been hurt are always careful. They measure every step before they take it." Something crossed her face then, fast and raw, before the professional smile clicked back into place. But he had seen it. A flash of the real thing, the woman underneath the competence and the distance and the relentless forward motion. She was exhausted. Not from the drive. From years. "The elders are having a gathering tomorrow," he said, giving her something else to stand on. "A meal, some stories. You're welcome to come, if you want to understand this place properly." She considered it with more seriousness than the casual invitation called for. "I'd like that," she finally said. He nodded and turned back toward the building, giving her the space she clearly needed. But as he walked away, he was aware of something waking up in him, slow and cautious and entirely unwilling to be rushed. He did not name it. He simply let it exist, the way the land let the sky exist, without trying to hold it or change it. Just present. Just real. Behind him, Sarah stood alone at the edge of the open land, watching the sun take its time. The elder's home was a modest house at the end of a dirt road, but inside it felt enormous with warmth. Blankets hung on the walls, patterned in colors that Sarah had no adequate words for. The smell of cedar and slow-cooked meat filled every room. About 30 people sat in loose circles, children weaving between knees, elders speaking in voices that rose and fell like water over stone. Nathan had introduced her simply as the new woman at the center, and people had nodded and welcomed her with a directness that startled her. No performance of hospitality. Just genuine, unadorned acceptance. She sat beside an elder woman named Ruth, who was 81 years old, had hands like knotted bark, and saw through people with the casual accuracy of someone who had been paying attention for 8 decades. "You're not just here for the job," Ruth said, not as an accusation, but as an observation, the way someone might note that rain was coming by the look of the sky. Sarah opened her mouth to deflect and then stopped. Something about the woman made deflection feel wasteful. "No," she admitted. "I'm here because I needed to be somewhere else." Ruth nodded slowly, satisfied. That's how most people find the right place. By running from the wrong one. The evening moved like a river, stories flowing from person to person, memory connecting to memory. Nathan sat across the circle from her, and she was aware of him the way you are aware of a fire in a cold room, not staring at it, but always knowing it is there. He spoke rarely, but when he did, people listened with a particular quality of attention that told her everything about the kind of man he was in this community. At one point, a young boy of about 7 climbed directly into Nathan's lap without asking, and Nathan's arm came around him with such immediate, natural ease that Sarah felt her throat tighten. She looked away. She recognized that gesture. Not from her own life, but from the absence of it. No one had ever held her that easily. Not her father, who had left when she was 6. Not her mother, before the illness. Not Daniel, who had loved her carefully, at arm's length, as if she was something that might break or burn. Later, after the meal, Nathan found her on the porch. "You went quiet in there," he said. "I was listening," she said. "You were disappearing," he said, without judgment. Just observation. She looked at him sharply. He met her eyes and waited. "When I was 12, she said, and then stopped. She had not planned to say anything. The words had simply arrived. "My mother died. Cancer. Slow and then fast, the way it goes. And my father had already been gone for years. So I went into the foster system." She paused. 3 homes in 4 years. The third one was the best and also the hardest, because I let myself feel safe there, and then the placement ended anyway. The night was very still around them. Stars had come out in numbers she had never seen in Chicago. "You learned that safety doesn't last," Nathan said. "I learned that needing things is dangerous," she corrected quietly. He was silent for a long moment. "I learned something similar," he said finally. "After Elena. I decided that loving someone meant preparing for the moment it would be taken away. So I kept everyone at a certain distance. Even Marcus, for a while." He paused. "He called me on it. He's 12 years old and he looked at me and said, 'You're still here but you're not all the way here.'" Sarah felt her eyes sting and blinked it back. "Smart kid. Terrifying kid," Nathan said. And this time, he did smile, fully and without reservation, and it changed his face completely. Opened it like a window. She felt something crack inside her chest, just slightly, just a small fracture along a wall she had been reinforcing for 20 years. She was not ready. She knew that clearly. But for the first time, she was not sure that unready meant no. 3 weeks into her time at Pine Ridge, a blizzard came down from the north with no adequate warning. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in 2 hours, and by early evening, the reservation was buried under a silence that only deep snow creates, the kind that swallows sound whole and replaces it with a pressure that feels almost like being held. Sarah had been at the center late, working with 2 teenage girls on a presentation for a school board meeting, when Nathan came through the door with snow on his shoulders and his expression set in the particular calm he wore when something was wrong and he was managing it. "Road to your rental is blocked," he said. "A tree came down across it. Crew won't get to it until morning." "I can sleep here," Sarah said, looking around the center. "The heating unit is on backup. It'll drop to 50 degrees by midnight." He paused. "You'll stay at the house." She started to object on instinct, then recognized the instinct for what it was. Self-protection dressed up as practicality. She closed her mouth and nodded. His house was 3 miles from the center, warm and plain and filled with books. One wall was entirely shelves. A fire was burning in a wood stove that anchored the living room with a steady, amber light. Marcus was asleep in the back bedroom, visited by a neighbor who had dropped him off earlier. Nathan made tea. She did not want tea, but she took it because the ritual of it was calming, and she needed something to do with her hands. They sat at the kitchen table, and the storm pressed against the windows, and the silence between them was different from any silence she had experienced before. It was not uncomfortable. It was not the silence of 2 people with nothing to say. It was the silence of 2 people who had said enough that the space between words had become its own kind of communication. "I found some of your case notes today," he said. "From the White Horse boy. Michael." Michael was 15, had stopped speaking in school, and had a father currently incarcerated. Sarah had been meeting with him every other day. "He's making progress," she said carefully. "He told me this morning that you remind him of someone who actually means it," Nathan said. That's the phrase he used. "Someone who actually means it." She set her mug down. "He said that." "He's not wrong," Nathan said quietly. He was looking at her directly, the way he always did, without guile or agenda, just the simple fact of seeing her. "You actually mean it, Sarah. Everything you do here. The question is whether you'll let yourself mean something to yourself." The fire popped. Outside, the wind pressed harder. She felt the crack in her chest from the night of the gathering open a little further, and this time she did not flinch away from it. "I don't know how to do that," she said. And it was the truest thing she had said to another person in years. "I know," he said. "Neither did I, for a long time." He paused. "Elena used to say that the bravest thing a person can do is let someone see them without the armor on. I thought that was something people said. Then she died, and I realized I had never fully done it, even with her. And that loss sat inside the regret for a long time. She looked at him. The firelight made his face look like something carved and ancient and deeply, quietly alive. She thought about the boy who had climbed into his lap. She thought about Ruth's words. She thought about 14 hours on an open road and a cracked side mirror and granola bars she had been living on instead of real meals, and she thought about how long she had been driving away from things without once asking herself what she was driving toward. "I'm scared," she said. "Of what?" he asked. "Of this. Whatever this is." She gestured between them with one hand. "Of wanting something I don't know how to keep." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and his voice was very steady. "I'm not asking you to keep anything. I'm asking you to stay long enough to find out what's possible. That's all. Just stay." The storm held everything in its enormous, white hands. And Sarah Calloway, who had spent 20 years in motion, sat completely still and let herself feel everything she had been outrunning for as long as she could remember. It hurt. It also felt, extraordinarily, like relief. Spring came to Pine Ridge the way it always does in that part of the country, slowly and then all at once. One morning the ground was frozen, and then a week later the sage was green and the meadowlarks were back and the sky had that particular blue that belongs only to the northern plains, enormous and clear and almost painful to look at directly. Sarah had stayed past her 6-month contract. She had not made a formal decision about it. She had simply noticed, when the end of her term approached, that leaving felt wrong in a way she could not rationalize away. She had submitted an extension request to the agency and received approval within 48 hours. She had not told anyone immediately, not even Nathan. She had sat with it alone for a full day, getting used to the shape of a choice made not out of motion but out of rootedness. Marcus noticed first, because Marcus noticed everything. He found her at the center on a Tuesday morning and stood in the doorway of her office with his arms crossed. "You're staying," he said. "Yes," she said. He nodded with the particular gravity of a 12-year-old who has decided not to let something matter too much and is failing at it. "Good," he said, and walked away. She told Nathan that evening, walking along the edge of the property where she had stood on her very first day. The sage was knee-high and smelled extraordinary in the early warmth, and the horizon was doing something complicated with gold and orange that no city she had ever lived in could have produced. He listened. He was quiet for a moment after she told him. Then he said, "I know." She laughed. Genuinely, fully. "Of course you know. Ruth told me you'd stay," he said. "She said you had the look of someone who had finally recognized a place that was trying to keep them." She thought about that for a moment. She had spent so long believing that the world was indifferent to her presence, that places and people simply moved around her without her mattering to the shape of things. The idea that a place had been trying to keep her was not something she had a ready defense against. "I want to talk to you about something," Nathan said. He stopped walking. She stopped beside him. He turned to face her, and his eyes were very serious and very warm in the same breath, which was something she had come to understand was simply the way he was. Serious and warm at once. Like the land he came from. "I have been careful," he said. "Since Elena. Carefully careful. And I don't regret being careful, because I needed time to grieve properly and to be the right kind of present for Marcus and for this community. But I think I let careful become a permanent condition. And I don't want that anymore." She waited, her heart very still. "I love you," he said. "I want to say it plainly and let it be what it is. I'm not asking you to respond in kind if you're not there. I'm not placing a condition on anything. I just want you to know, because you deserve to be told clearly and without performance, that you matter to me. What you've brought to this place, what you've shown these kids, what you've allowed me to see of yourself. It matters. You matter." She had imagined, in the private way people imagine things they want but believe they cannot have, that when someone finally said those words to her and meant them, she would panic. She had expected the familiar tightening, the door slamming shut, the impulse to leave before something could be taken. She had been bracing for it. It did not come. What came instead was something she had no previous experience with and therefore had no word for, a feeling of landing after a very long fall, of the ground meeting her not as a collision but as a welcome. She felt her eyes fill, and she did not blink it back this time. She let it come, the way Nathan had once told her the sun sets on the plains. All the way. Uninterrupted. "I love you too," she said. "And I'm terrified. And I'm staying." He reached out and took her hand. Not dramatically. Not with urgency. Just steadily, the way he did everything, as though he had all the time that had ever existed and intended to use it well. His hand was warm, and it was solid, and it did not let go. They stood there in the sage-scented evening while the meadowlark sang and the enormous sky turned every color it knew, and Sarah Calloway, who had carried her scars for 32 years like stones in her pockets, felt them become something different. Not gone. Scars do not disappear. But lighter. Held by something larger than herself. Changed by a warrior's steady, patient, open heart into something she had never once believed she deserved. A beginning.